Hey folks, welcome back. This is episode 2, Rethinking It All podcast. We decided to make this episode focused on a topic that Steve is well versed in. He's working on a good book about it, to be honest with you. But dating, a topic that really affects everyone, I think, and a topic that is widely discussed in podcasts today. There's a variety of podcasts on the subject. Some would say some are good, some are bad. I guess it depends on what you're looking for. But there are a lot of popular ones out there that discuss the topic of modern dating and how it's changed from the past with the advent of things like Tinder, just the whole online dating scene. It really changed things, how people had access to dating, I think. And I don't know, what's kind of your take on modern dating in general? Dating. I mean, because it has, I can tell you even from my perspective, it's changed in my lifetime from, I've never gotten into the online stuff per se. Yeah. I'm a traditional guy in that sense. I like to meet people naturally. Yeah. But what do you think?
Things have changed a lot for sure, tremendously. I guess people used to call it organic, we call it now organic dating. Yeah. When people meet in person, it's organic. Right. And there isn't quite so much of that going on anymore. And it has a lot to do with how much more separate we are. We're not as community-based as we are. We don't get together as much as we used to. And we're much more alone and much more in our own little worlds. And of course that's reinforced a lot by our technology with smartphones and the internet, and so it's hard to meet people in person these days. It's actually quite difficult. I mean, if the old, I don't know if it's true, but people used to go to restaurants or bars and sit and you would talk and meet with people. And I've done some of that. Every now and then if I do that by myself. Some years ago, and sometimes people are willing to talk to you. A lot of times people look like they're going to hit 911. Right. they're ready to do 911. Yeah. Or even like waiting in line at a coffee shop or Starbucks. You start talking to somebody, especially around here in the Northwest, and suddenly they're ready to hit 911. Right. I mean, like, who are you talking? Like, why are you dare talking to me? So, I know it's a lot different. I think there are different geographical regions where kind of how people talk and communicate is a little different. Like, I think if you're in, LA or Northeast New York, I mean, people are more willing to talk with each other in a coffee shop when you meet people. I think in Seattle seemed to be less of that, in my opinion. That's been my experience. Yeah. Of course, a lot of people have talked about that, but yeah, I mean, internet dating, online dating is what people do now, because it's really one of the few ways you can meet other people. I mean, yeah, you can join a soccer club or kickball club or hiking club, or you can meet people that way through clubs. Okay, people still do that.
Yeah. It seems like we've made it almost awkward to just walk up to somebody now, or something. Or has it always been that way?
Well, it's always been awkward. You remember growing up; it was always awkward to ask somebody.
Somehow, have we made it more of like a no kind of thing? Like, I'm just out doing my thing. Leave me alone. If you want to meet me through an app or something.
Yeah, because there's also a lot of liability issues now. So another place people used to date a lot is at work. People used to meet a lot of people at work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and obviously there were some relationships at work that were that were not good for one or both people. Where there might be exploitation of some sort, but generally, a lot of people met at work. People developed relationships at work. Sometimes it was relationships between, let's say, in terms of where they were in the business, might be equal, but sometimes it wasn't, in terms of their status in the business wasn't equal, so there was both. But now things have gotten pretty litigious, and so a lot of people won't date at work. Or if they do, they're extremely careful about it. In fact, a lot of companies, you're supposed to report to HR if you're having a relationship with anybody in the company.
Right.
which of course, like once you tell HR that, then there's the magnifying glass is going to
Exactly.
be on you, and also it would probably, that would be considered like a mark against you, and probably would make it more difficult for you for promoting or moving up through the company.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming. I mean, I don't want to speak. I wonder if the current climate and everything has made men or women more reluctant to approach each other at work for a number of reasons, especially if there's a power dynamic going on.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it, power.
But God, I think at least two of relationships I had, I met at work. We had the same level of but I think it's just when you're in close proximity to someone,
right,
for a long period of time, every day or something, you naturally just get to know them, and then you start realizing if you mesh. And and then what follows, and it's such a different experience from just walking up to somebody at a coffee house or something where you're just kind of you're shooting your shot.
Right.
And but you have made dating a subject that you research. I mean, your book is it's some really interesting stuff in there in terms of questionnaires and stuff, which we may have time to get to.
Right.
But how do you study dating? Because obviously you put some time in.
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of research out there that kind of looks at what makes relationships work and what makes relationships not work. A lot of work done by Gottman and some other researchers around kind of marriage and long-term relationships, and a lot of that research applies to people dating too, in lots of ways. Dating is, it's dating. You're trying to discover whether the person is the right match for you. I mean, depending, you may not be interested in a match. You may be interested in something that's more short term. So a lot of dating depends on kind of what you're interested in, what your values are. And online dating, it kind of reverses things in terms of what you were talking about. When you meet somebody at work, you kind of get to know them, and you develop a friendship. And online dating, it's hard to develop friendships in the beginning because obviously you're both on there, you're looking for a match, for an intimate relationship usually, and sometimes the pressure to have an intimate relationship is pretty strong, and so the friendship part never doesn't develop as slowly. And then people find themselves, in an intimate relationship, you get more attached because of the intimacy, and just because people are just social and want to connect in the first place, and then as you get more attached, you might then discover, well, this isn't so right person for me. But then it might be hard to get out of the situation because you feel attached, they feel attached, but you're not really good friends, and maybe being good friends can never happen, and that then takes a lot of time and energy and heartbreak and all sorts of stuff like that. That's not so good. But so online dating has that tendency to focus more on sex and intimacy early on, and that's one of the major complaints you hear about people going on online dating. The thing really we should recognize about online dating is that all online dating is like going to a virtual bar. The reason I can say that is because if you look at all the online dating apps, they all create a sort of a match for you, but most people realize that you can keep going from match to match. You can see lots of people. So is there a real match for you? Yeah, we both like dogs. We both like to hike. We both but that's sort of the match. But that doesn't mean there's a match in personality. Now there's some attempts at personality, but the major problem with the apps is there's no feedback. There's no way the people who develop these apps can know what personality traits, what behaviors, what values brought two people together. There's just too many of them. So they have no idea. So these apps have very little predictive capacity. They're like virtual bars. Even though they may say they have predictive capacity, because there's no feedback, there's no way they can look at their data set, whatever data they're accumulating, they have no idea how the data is being, how it's being used by two people or more than two people. And so that's why dating apps are just, they sort of allow you to meet somebody, like in a virtual bar, but they don't necessarily are accurate.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, the complaints that I often hear with regard to dating apps are that, I think Tinder released data on this, and that I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but it showed something like a vast majority of the women went for a small minority of the men.
Right.
And then this leaves most of the men in an awkward position where it seems like none of the girls on there want them.
Right.
And so, you get, does it not just kind of skew or manipulate dating in an awkward way? Because, I mean, I'm sure some of these guys would be compatible with those girls, but you're only looking at a picture.
Right.
And maybe a few lines of,
but if you only can look at a picture, then you decide based on a picture. So you're...
But is that a bad thing?
Well, it's a thing that then leads to the results you're talking about because you're not getting enough data. You're not getting enough information about the other person other than a picture and something funny they wrote or something they've written about themselves that may be true or false. So the people who are good at marketing themselves, who know what other people would like, actually you can pay people to write your profile and so it has more hits on all the apps and pictures and things. These become what people are making decisions on. And of course, those cannot be very good decisions because you really don't know anything about the person. You've just seen whatever they told you and however they look. And looks have something to do with it. But good relationships go way beyond looks. People who stay attached and committed, there's a real sense of connectedness and energy between two people. There's a kind of a we-ness, a relationship, not just two eyes. That enable the relationship to be sustained and to develop and grow.
Right. And so, I mean, do you think maybe that we've just gone too far into the looks department? Because, obviously you see someone, you immediately make some sort of value judgment about whether or not you're attracted to them, or when sometimes attraction is something that could be built. So are we missing out on it?
The problem is that if you don't meet people in person, and all you do is see a picture and a few lines about them, you don't have very much information.
Yeah.
But think of it as, like similar to being in high school. In high school, there were the popular guys and the popular girls and popular people. And those are the people everybody wanted to be with. And then there was a vast majority of people and teenagers who nobody took an interest in. Okay,
so nothing's changed much.
but in a sense it's similar because what are people hyper focused? I don't want to during this time is they're focused on certain, you might say, superficial things. Looks, how popular somebody is. I don't know. There's somebody is a sports whatever. There's this sort of thing. And that makes the popular people.
Yeah.
And then, the rest of, there are a lot of people, a lot of clients of mine have, had horrible dating experiences in high school, okay? Because they weren't part of the popular, they weren't popular. And I think the same thing is happening on the internet, except it's even worse because it's so much harder now to meet people in person. So you have, there was a lot of people are not getting many matches, whether it's on Tinder or Match or a lot, it varies. It varies the amount of matching. And, on some of the other dating sites like Match, you can provide a lot more information. And with all that information, you might have a better idea whether this person is somebody you want to meet. On the other hand, some people are just not good at describing themselves. It's like, first time you meet somebody, you just met somebody randomly, we try to make decisions about them, but our decisions is based on a very limited information. The information is impoverished, so our decisions can be easily wrong. It's just like looking at a dating site. And so people bait, but you got to base something on some reason to meet somebody.
Yeah. Well, I got a question for you, mate.
Sorry.
So, if say I'm a guy and I'm on Tinder or Match or something, and I'm not having any success. No one wants to match with me or something. What would you recommend to someone who just has no success with the online dating? Do they just need to go back to the old-fashioned way? I mean, if it's not through the online avenues these days, Because, the question is always, where do I
Right.
meet a good person for
Right,
me?
right.
Yeah.
Probably the old-fashioned ways, joining groups.
So go to where people are.
Got to go where people are, and also going where people are. It's important to go to people who are going to relate to you. Okay, so if you have somebody who's say a high-end engineer, okay, or somebody who's extremely well educated, they're probably not going to do so well hanging out at McDonald's, finding somebody. Okay, that doesn't mean there isn't somebody at McDonald's who's kind of who is kind of a Goodwill Hunting kind of person, like sort of a genius kind of a smart person there, just happen to be working at McDonald's, and sure, you'll find people like that there, but the odds of finding a companion that's going to match you, at least intellectually, or is going to be more difficult. So if maybe you meet people at conferences. Maybe you've got to go where the people are that you are interested in, that are going to match you in some ways.
So maybe it just requires maybe a little more thinking than just opening up an app on your phone. You should think about what I'm interested in,
right,
and where are similar people.
Right. And I think being I think it's best to be authentic as possible, because you don't want to match with somebody that's not going to work for you. I think it's important to really be you on these apps, to talk about to be really honest about how you think and what's important to you. What is it you want, and I think if you do that, you might get less hits, you might get less people interested in you, but the people who are interested in you maybe really are interested in you because they your vibe connects with them, your authenticity does. So I think being authentic, and I know I have a friend who was a very attractive woman, and she gets tons of hits on Tinder, and and did a lot of dating. She actually had a spreadsheet and keep track of all the men. I know it sounds kind of funny. Anyway,
it's not the first time I've heard of something like that.
Yeah, and
interesting.
She
it
keep track of them.
Some women do, yeah.
But none of them worked out. Over many years. Because I don't know, there's a lot of reasons why, but maybe it's because whatever is attractive about that person in reality doesn't work, because then you find out all this other information about them, and again, the more data you can get about somebody, the more information you can get, then the more you can see how you relate, and then information is also very interactive. Like when you meet somebody who you really like, or you just sort of connect with, you might talk a lot more about yourself. You might be more vulnerable. You might share more personal information. Whereas you might meet somebody that you're like, I don't know, this person's kind of judgmental, or I don't know, there's something about this person. And so you shut down a little bit. You don't disclose as much. You don't talk as much. And this happens obviously when people are dating, is to find somebody you really connect with. But again, that can sometimes people meet the first time and there isn't much, and maybe it's a second or third time. Oftentimes because both people are feeling kind of unsure of themselves, lack of confidence, or they're withholding because they don't want to be vulnerable, or they've thought, this is how I market myself to somebody, and sometimes it takes a few dates to get through that to get to the real person.
Something that just popped into my head in relation to what you just said. So I don't want to necessarily make this about any certain individual, but say if you were like a woman who had a list of guys, a long list, and it didn't work out with, is that something where you need to register, well, maybe I need to look at something within myself as the cause of this, or is it a problem with the people I chose? Or
no. This is really important. You're talking about something really interesting. Yeah, the person needs to look at themselves, and one of the problems is seeing people for who they really are. We when all relationships involve some projection of our ideal. So when somebody meets somebody and they're sort of falling in love or they like them, they project their ideals of what they want in a person. And the question is, do the ideals match up with the reality of this person? How connected are they, or how disparate are they? How different are they? And somebody who is not connected with the reality of the person but only their projection, their idealization is, obviously then it's not going to work at some point because reality and ideals don't connect. Or sometimes people will project their ideals on somebody, even though it doesn't connect. They get so attached that they can't leave them. Even the person isn't good for them. Like, they're dating a drug addict or somebody who treats them poorly. A whole variety of things. They feel still attached. It's very hard to let go because it means letting go of their ideal. Not the real person, but the ideal. They can't let go of the ideal. Am I making any...
I'm trying to understand. So, like the idea, like what this person could be if I change the kind of like
my ideal lover, my ideal guy, girl, my ideal partner.
So, like maybe this person has the potential to become what I have envisioned in my mind.
No, but the person projects it as if they were.
Okay.
As if they have that, even though they don't.
Oh wow! So you're really just kind of. It's almost like a delusion in a way.
Well, yeah. I would say, falling in love has delusional qualities to it. Okay?
Fair enough.
It always has some. I mean, there's, good relationships are based in reality. There's a reality that connects you. But sometimes there are things that, that the person that you think is there that isn't there. And that's fine. And you find out about that and you work it through. This is what then happens in relationships. You usually have a honeymoon period, and that's when there's these projections and everything is wonderful. And then you begin to see some reality, some things that don't fit with the ideal, with what it is you want. And then this leads then to little arguments or discussions. But there are also opportunities to develop. This is how we develop. It's very hard to develop only with yourself because you hear your own stuff over and over again. And other people, you don't control them. They can provide you with feedback so you can evolve, so you can develop as a person, become a better human being. And then relationships enable that to happen. At least we hope they do.
Well, I guess it takes time in a way, because something you just said made me remember that kind of, in the honeymoon period, at least, of like a relationship, people aren't necessarily acting like themselves, I feel like sometimes people put on, a different face almost. You put on your best behavior almost,
right.
You're trying to look your best always.
Oh, yeah.
And so certain realities are hidden for the time.
Yeah.
Right? And then those come up later.
Yeah.
But is there a way around
that?
Yeah.
Well, no, it's hard because, let me sort of give an example. Sometimes we'll look at sort of traditional male-female relationships. So you might, sometimes males may come across as kind of like kings. They have this sort of king quality, leadership, vision, confidence, and they may have a little bit of warrior in them. They get stuff done, but they may not have a lot of lover in them. There may not be a lot of real way of connecting and being vulnerable and talking about emotions and really exploring things. There may not be a lot of that. And they may not have much creativity. They may not be much of a magician, have the magician artistic quality. So some men will, even though they're very king-oriented, they may bring a little of this lover and magician with them. So they appear a little more creative, a little bit more loving and caring. But it's really kind of superficial because they really are just kings. And then once the relationship happens, and I hear this from a number of women, is then suddenly, they're engaged or somehow the relationship is cemented or married. And then suddenly the lover and magician disappears. And then what you're left with is the king. And how can I have married? How can I be with this person? Right?
Yeah.
And there's a great disappointment because the lover quality and the magician quality was sort of used in order to bring the person in, because the person, again, if we're talking about a woman, is very attracted to the alpha, to the king stuff. But person who is really just into being a king, they're not so much interested in people per se. They're interested in their kingdom. So they're interested in their kingdom, getting things done, their world, their vision. And when you are partnered with somebody like that, you are part of the kingdom. You are a minister. You are not you're not an equal. Okay, kings are not about equality.
That sounds more like what some would call a traditional or old school.
Yeah, it could be traditional, and some, some people are going to be fine with that. Some people, will they want somebody who's pretty alpha, and they enjoy kind of being more someone who takes care of the alpha, more motherly, kind of in a traditional sense, maybe more submissive, more going along with the king. And that works. And I'm not just talking about, in the bedroom, but also in other ways with career and other things that might work. But you could have a woman who's, also has a career, but is part of the kingdom. So,
yeah.
But, versus, whereas there are sometimes other men who are more lover, they're kind of more into the lover, magician, artist, kind of caring, a little more kind of relationally oriented, other oriented. They think more about others than about themselves. The king is more fairly self-oriented, and women might be attracted to that too. So there's different kinds of attractions.
So you keep mentioning what I guess we would call archetypes.
Yeah.
What are those, and kind of what do they mean? Like when you say the lover and the magician,
right.
or the king, can you expand? Because that's something that's a little foreign even to me.
Right. Well, archetypes are kind of like global roles or global ways of being in the world that humans have. There's just many different types of ways we are in the world, or the way the psyche can be split up into different roles and aspects. So you might say there's a leader quality in all of us. There's a lover quality. There's a warrior. There's a shadow side to us, a dark side or shadow side.
So there's something that everyone pretty much has, but at varying degrees.
Right. It comes from Jungian psychology. That's where it was first developed. Jung came across with archetypes. But you see this in a lot of other kinds of therapies, internal family systems, where you might have, there's a fireman who's out to, make sure that fire and nothing been there might be something more, a part of the personality that's more into being sort of the leader and control. There's just different aspects. There's just different ways of splitting the human psyche.
Okay, and an archetype, they're kind of different from like a stereotype, or are they similar?
Well, they can be stereotypic, but you could have somebody, human beings can be quite complex and varied. We have all these archetypes are within us. Some are more developed than others. So you might have somebody who is very artistic and creative and also very emotional and connecting with people, but just can't seem to get anything done. Can't seem to achieve much. Can't seem to get much achieved because they don't know how to develop that confidence or get that king stuff or that warrior stuff going, so that they can get stuff done.
Or can you change your archetype?
You can develop it. I believe it or not, my archetypes I was probably strongest in are more the magician and lover and warrior, and the king has been the hardest one for me to develop. Believe it or not, that sounds like this because I'm sitting here, we're doing a podcast. He's got some chutzpah to do some podcast, but actually, it's taken me decades to develop more of the king quality in myself, and be comfortable with it, because you've got to be comfortable with being the leader and not necessarily being liked. So kings are not interested in necessarily being liked. They're interested in doing what's right, what's best for the kingdom, what's best for whatever it is they're doing. And lovers want to be liked. If you're in the lover archetype, you want to be liked. So people who need to be liked too much, or to be accepted, or are too focused on accommodating others or taking care of others, it's very difficult for them to be kings or queens. But that'd be the other side.
Okay, so these apply to both
both male and female. Yeah, kings and queens, or whatever you want to talk about, that kind of leadership. Or
if you were like a guy or something and you wanted to attract more females, is there a certain archetype that you would want to
No, it all depends.
Be front and center more.
No, it all depends what you're into. It's what
All depends on what the female is into.
Well, and you are into, and what works. Sometimes you might get a king and a queen. Say somebody who is dominantly a king archetype, you might get together with a queen archetype. But
really,
yeah, but they're probably going to be power struggles.
Right, that's right.
Okay, so that might be a problem.
Like, would that be like two alphas essentially?
Yeah, two alphas, right? But it's not to say there are relationships work. There's alphas. Yeah, they just learn how to deal with the power struggles.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And the concept of an alpha man is something thrown around a lot these days.
Right,
but
right.
what does that even mean?
Well, I think there can be lots of different alpha men. I mean, you could have alpha men, obviously, who, let's say, stereotypically makes a lot of money. That's one, or has a lot of power politically. That could be an alpha man. But you could have somebody who's alpha intellectually. That can be very attractive to other people, let's say, in an intimate relationship. They're not just attracted, they may not be interested in money and power. They may be interested in your intelligence, or they may be interested in your creativity. That could be an alpha. So there are lots of different kinds of alphas. You might be interested in that you're really great at listening. You're very other-oriented, and you really want to understand how people are doing, and you're willing to accommodate and collaborate and cooperate. That could be an alpha. In fact, there are many different leadership styles. There are collaborative, cooperative leaders, and then there are leaders who are, it's my way or the highway kind of leaders, who are very dominant, and what we normally think as an alpha. But, there are lots of different leadership styles, so...
Well, and is an alpha either, is that something that, in general, the opposite sex is attracted to most? A majority of the opposite sex would be attracted to
I would
most?
say, people are attracted to energy. We're attracted to people's energy, to their vibrancy, to qualities about them. And that energy can be expressed in lots of different ways. It might be money, it might be creativity, intellect, friendly, I don't know, there's a whole variety of things. So people are attracted to different things. Now, there is a lot of traditional stuff out there, where people may be saying, well, they're only alpha, you have to be an alpha man, in the traditional sense, you've got to make a lot of money.
Or that there can't be an alpha woman.
Right. You can't be with an alpha woman. That's not going to work. Your woman has to be more subordinate and kind of home-bodied and that sort of stuff. And you would think after, hundreds of years of women gaining more rights and diversity that we would be beyond that stereotype, but clearly we're not, because that is propagated a lot in, I guess, different podcasts. So,
well, if there's, I mean, could we break that down to say that, like, I don't know, would that just be someone's preference, and maybe they just prefer the more so-called traditional woman? Would that be a thing, or do you think we should be moving beyond that?
I think we should be moving beyond dominance. I think dominance actually leads to all kinds of dissension. It leads to the person being dominant, not necessarily learning and developing, because they're so into their dominance, they're into their know-it-allness or into their power that they don't necessarily change. And the person in a subordinate position doesn't change either. So, there are issues with dominance. We all need, I think, to feel dominant in different ways. We all need to feel successful in different ways. But dominance usually means there's a lack, in my sense, there's a lack of listening to the other, of really caring and accommodating to the other when there's too extreme dominance. I mean, sometimes, again, people need to make decisions. They need to be decisive. You can be decisive, but you don't need to be oppressive. And, so dominance can move into oppression. And so, there's a lot of, there's still a lot of domestic violence that goes on. I mean,
sure.
Domestic violence is clearly, again, it happens more with men than with women, but the person, the person who's committing domestic violence they're into domination, control, power, and they fear not having that power. So that becomes, in a sense, a weakness. People who are into domination at that extreme level are very fearful people. Really deep down, and very insecure, and the only thing that makes them feel secure is power and control, which is unfortunate because it leads to a lot of unhappiness, not just with themselves, but with others.
I mean, relationships, do you think isn't it kind of natural for a relationship to have like one who is a leader and, or is it always, should it be equal?
Well, there's no should. I mean, again, it just depends who you are and your personality,
Right.
and what works for you. There's some relationships where, it works really well where somebody's more the leader and the person's a little bit more the follower. That can work, but some people want more of an equal relationship. Some people not so equal. And then also we have to look at the word equal. What does equal mean? I mean, people are always very different, and they have different strengths and weaknesses. And what oftentimes makes a relationship work, what I think makes relationships work, is not how similar people are, but how they complement each other. It's complementarity, not so much similarity, that brings people together. This is why when you meet couples that seem to be working well together, they're oftentimes pretty different. Now, would you say one's the boss and one's the whatever? No, oftentimes I don't think that's the case. They're just different, and they complement each other in different ways. You might have a woman who's, again, just, a female who's very good at building houses and very good at concrete, and fixing toilets and all that kind of stuff. I'm not good at that. Okay, I'm not a good. I'm not good at somebody who can build. I can't do that kind of stuff.
So you might be well suited to a carpenter.
I might be well suited a woman who is more kind of a carpenter and does it. Not all, but I'm saying that could be a compliment with me and somebody else. And am I above her because I happen to be a little more theoretical in my thinking or whatever, or a little more professorial, and she's more into being. No, it's not. There's no better. It's just, it's different. But we complement each other. In our complementation, we help each other. Or, some people are very introverted and kind of more, quieter. Sometimes you'll see them with a partner who is much more extroverted,
right,
much more flamboyant, and the one who throws the parties, But you might say, well, why is that person interested in introvert? Because maybe the introvert creates this quiet space, this accepting space for the extrovert, where they don't have to be on show all the time. They don't have to be in showtime all the time. They can actually just relax and let go and be with this more introverted person. And so that relationship works. Now, can the introverted person learn to be from their partner a little more extroverted, a little more social, and develop?
Right.
Yes. And can the extroverted person learn to be a little more self-reflective and internal? Yes.
So in general,
that's
kind of a good rule. I think a lot of people probably say, well, I need to look for someone who has all these similarities to the way I am.
Right.
Versus they should be really kind of looking for how does this person complement.
Yeah, both. I think you need both. I mean, you got to have some similarities. I mean,
Sure.
I like to hike a lot. And so, generally somebody I'm with also hikes. Not all the time, but generally hikes. Maybe it's somebody who likes to go to, symphony or operas and stuff. I like doing that. And, that might be part of the match. But it has to be some similarity, some matching across things you like to do. But the complementarities is what really, I think, is the glue that pulls people together.
Okay, so like if they didn't like operas or whatever, it wouldn't be like a deal breaker.
No, it's not a deal breaker. Not for me, anyways. Now, for some people, it might be. Again, everyone's
I'm sure there's
different.
some carpenter women who like operas out there. Maybe, I don't know.
Of course, or vice versa. I don't know. Anyway, the key is about, good relationships is about expanding your horizons. So the other person enables you to do things and expand who you are in ways you would never do yourself. So that's a wonderful thing about being with somebody.
Well, but and this is interesting because what you just said there, I think a lot of the talk that goes around these days is solely around relationships, men and women, whatever. It could be anything, I suppose. Being transactional almost exclusively,
Right.
Which obviously relationship is transactional in a way, but you're talking about much more than that, right?
We're a society that is focused on the individual. So, and I will say extreme individualism, and it's all about what I can get. It's all about meism, and that's pretty prevalent in our society. However, meism is not what leads to happiness. So, yeah, I can kind of get what I want transactionally, but I may not be happy with what I get. And this has to do with viewing people as commodities. They're a commodity. They have some value in terms of whatever whatever you decide, money or something. But that doesn't lead to a good attachment necessarily. It's attachments, our relationships, our connectedness. That it's a we thing that brings people together, not just a me thing. Yeah, there's a me you bring into the relationship, two people do, but it's also there's a we. It's the attachment and the connected. It's the caring and the compassion that you care about somebody, not because they're going to do something for you, because you just care about them. I mean, why is this surprising? All we have to do is look at parents and their children. There are a lot of parents who would die for their kids and do anything for their kids. The kids don't get much. I mean, yeah, there's something coming back from the kids, but that's not why the parents do it. Just because they care and they love, and there's this deep attachment. And this is what works in good relationships, is deep attachment. Not whether you can, you marry somebody because they've got money, that may not work. Now, there are people who do that, marry for money or for power or something, and sometimes it does work because in the process you develop an attachment. We can't help. We're social creatures. We can't help but develop an attachment. So then people can fall in love, and they fall in love with the person that they had this initial transactional relationship. Now sometimes they all only stay transactional, and those are people then who have very little empathy, very little caring, who really treat everyone and anything and themselves in the world as an object and interchangeable. And, that's not a good thing.
So, it's a bad thing, or I guess you'll answer, but is it a bad so if a guy, he says, oh, I want to find a hot chick, she's young, she's compliant, submissive, she'll be a stay-at-home mother, doesn't have her own career. And is it bad for a woman to say, well, I want an older gentleman who makes a lot of money. He's an alpha guy. He's got he works out. People respect him, and he pays all the bills. I don't have to do anything. And are those bad things?
No,
are they just preferences?
It could be. It just depends on the person. We don't know much about the person. Now they may be trained to believe that because of their culture or because they were brought up. That's what's important, but maybe deep down inside, that's not what they want, and then they'll be unhappy. Lots of people will follow certain norms, like the norm is I'm supposed to marry a rich person or something, and they do it, and they're very unhappy. I mean, you can read, there's lots of literature and lots of movies, about people who have a lot of money and are pretty unhappy people. Okay, I mean, I don't know. Anyways, all the TV shows, about rich people, and how unhappy they are. And a lot of it's because there isn't this sense of caring and connection. Everything is transactional. It's all about getting what you want, and then then it becomes kind of heartless. And when it's heartless, it's hard for relationships can still exist like that. I mean,
I'm sure they do.
There are, a famous psychologist, Robert Sternberg, wrote a book called Love Stories, and he kind of looks at different types of we might say genres or stories. So, love is a business. Love could be a business, and sometimes that is for certain people. It's all about the family and the business and making things run and making money, but there's not necessarily much love between the two people. I mean, there might be some affection or respect, but not necessarily what we think of as love, because it's a business relationship. And there are couples that are business, or families that are business relationships, or extended families.
Yeah.
Love could be a tapestry where two people are working on the same tapestry. That's a lot more cooperative and a lot more attachment. Or love is a garden. Love is an adventure. Love is war. Generally, probably not a good one, but I worked once with a couple a long time ago, and they would beat each other up. And at some point, I couldn't work with them because they were into it. They weren't going to change.
They were in.
Yeah,
so they took it to each other.
I couldn't. I was open with it. We're on. Very open. I said, I couldn't work with them because that's what they were into, and I could not, with my value system, support that.
Oh, interesting. Were they seeking to?
No, they were into it. They were like, it's kind of like Fight Club or something. They enjoyed, a little bit, and I'm there.
To each their own. I guess.
Yeah, right. But it wasn't something,
You didn't see it as being particularly healthy.
I didn't think that was a healthy. Now it's a way of, again, that's my judgmentalness. But I just, there's certain I mean, sometimes you got to draw the line. So things we can accept and not accept,
So is it not enough then to gauge whether, well, I mean, not only am I finding what I'm looking for, but am I happy when I get it?
Exactly.
So,
That's a perfect way of putting it. Am I happy with what I get? And then sometimes people keep picking the wrong person. Oh, and this gets us into chemistry, which is a whole thing. I mean, chemistry is important. I mean, you should feel some attraction. There should be something going on. But sometimes people's chemistry is wrong. And how do we know it's wrong? How does the person know it's wrong? Because they keep dating the same person and it never works. They keep dating the same type of person and it doesn't work. So that means probably there's something wrong with your chemistry. There's something wrong with whatever you're looking for, whatever is attracting you is not working. And then maybe you need to see a therapist or talk to somebody to change that, because it's not, why keep doing the same thing over and over again?
Well, I think a lot of people get into this kind of mode where when the relationship fails, they go, well, it's the other person's fault. It's their fault every time. Yeah. And they don't really... Well, it doesn't register that maybe I'm the problem.
Right. They externalize blame, and that's not good. You need self-reflection in good relationships. Some people have a difficult time with self-reflecting, and it's always the other person's fault. Unfortunately, those are the very people who go from one relationship to the next, because, none of relationships work because obviously it's not about them.
So the only way to get out of that vicious cycle is to kind of wake up and recognize what's happening.
At some moment there's a certain level of happiness, and you think you begin to self-reflect or see somebody to help you. Somebody might say, go to a therapist and say, geez, I keep dating, blah, blah, and this never goes anywhere. These relationships never go anywhere. And it might be because, the person has certain values and personality and things that, a certain chemistry that they're, person they're attracted to that's not working. So that needs to be deconstructed. It needs to be explored, and maybe the person needs to expand. Sometimes you'll see this where sometimes, somebody will date somebody, there's some mild chemistry. They're not, again, stereotypic, let's say females dating a guy, the guy's not tall enough, he's not whatever,
Right.
But however, the guy's really witty, and he's funny, and he's entertaining, and he's interesting, and he's caring, and the person begins to think, well, maybe that's more important about whether they're tall or not, and some people change, some people don't. I know people, it was online, I've also been on the online dating scene, so I know a lot about it. But I remember one time one person telling me that they wouldn't date anybody who was under 6 feet.
You hear that a lot these days.
Yeah, right. And
that seems to be a deal breaker for a lot of people.
but that's okay if that's your deal breaker. However,
you're talking about a situation where maybe they get to know someone, and all of a sudden that deal breaker goes away. But you have to get to that point.
But you have to get to that point, right? Let's say there's a particular person, and they only date people over 6 feet. Or 6'2" or something like that, and they've dated 12 people over a long period of time, and none of them have worked. Well, maybe they should reconsider what the 6 feet thing is. Now, there might be a lot more behind the 6 feet. It's not just the 6 feet, but there's a lot of other values underneath that are preventing the connection and the person finding what they really want. So sometimes people have superficial things like 6 feet, but there's other things that are impacting why the relationship doesn't work.
Well, so do you think we're building too many arbitrary, superficial preferences these days? Because, people say it matters to them. That they need to be this tall, or they need to have this color hair.
The media, our culture has tremendous effects on us. So I think we can't help but have certain kinds of preferences or certain things, and I don't know. I guess we just try our best to negotiate around them and try to see through them for what they are. It's a complex. It's complex, and there's no...
Well, I think preferences in some cases get demonized too these days.
Right.
And is that a...
Like what? Like what kind of...
Well, today if a guy says he doesn't want to date an overweight woman,
right,
that can be seen as problematic.
That can be problematic.
But at the same time, should the man really feel shamed for his preference?
That's a whole You
It's
know,
a can of worms right
can
there.
of worms there. I don't know if I want to get into,
Yeah.
but it depends on the person. I mean, if you have somebody who feels very strongly about that, and they're unwilling to consider other things, then that's what's going to happen. They're not. You only want to date a
Right.
certain kind of body type or something. And some of this is gets classically conditioned. Sexuality can be conditioned to almost anything. So that's why, you see sex and commodities on TV all the time. Sex and cars, pretty men or women with cars. And so we're more likely to buy that car because it's connected with sex. And so that sexuality is a very powerful reinforcer. And so a lot of our preferences are learned. You're not born liking brunettes. You're not born liking blondes. You're not born liking. You're not
Are you
born.
sure?
No, we're not born with any of that. Okay, it is learned by our culture. We get classically conditioned about what is sexually preferable versus
Do you
what's
think
not.
that's true 100% of the time?
Well, not 100%. There's probably there's some other stuff involved.
I mean, I could see where it might come from
Right.
things you don't even recognize happened, or you got you don't really recognize the conditioning when it's happening.
Right. Well, this
And
is
then,
why
then you just have those
Right.
preferences, and you don't really understand
right.
where they came from. I
Right.
suppose that could be possible.
You think of two people on an island. The last two people on this island, they can never get off. And normally they would hate each other, or normally they wouldn't be attracted to each other. I can guarantee you, after a couple of years, they're probably having an intimate relationship, and they've changed how they think about all these things.
All right. Well, I
Over
guess
a long period of
once
time,
options
because-
become a little more limited.
Well, yeah, but then it changes they get conditioned differently. So then what was unacceptable becomes acceptable or even preferable. So sometimes you see this happen in relationships. Sometimes you see this between friends. So there might be two people who are friends who aren't really attracted to each other, maybe slightly mildly, but not really attracted to each other. But over time, because they really get to know each other and begin to really like all these other things about each other, that the things they found not attractive slowly start becoming attractive or acceptable.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they fall in love with this person that they would never have fallen in love with, not without that kind of history of getting to know the person. And so then the chemistry thing changes over time. So chemistry can be changed.
Yeah, it really sounds like in some way the key might be to give more opportunities to people you think might not be within your dating preference or something.
Right. That's the positive side, but there's also a negative side to this, and that is people can get classically conditioned into anonymous sex. Where it is a type of conditioning. Somebody might really just want to have feel, I need to have a real personal connection, there needs to be emotional connection, but anonymous sex can be practiced, and as it's practiced and it gets reinforced, then the person starts moving down that path. So somebody might never be interested in going to a sex club, but then they might go to a sex club and maybe they don't really care for it, but it's a little tantalizing, and they go a second and third time, and pretty soon they're into the sex club, into anonymous sex, possibly. Maybe not. Maybe they still find it, they don't like it and don't do it. And there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with anonymous sex, but I'm just saying that's another form of classical conditioning that can go on in terms of chemistry, of what people prefer and not prefer. The problem with anonymous sex, though, is there's this lack of emotional connection, this lack of really caring and being cared about by the other person, which I think, our culture already has a lot of problems with anonymity to begin with our loneliness and how lonely people are. So I don't know if that's really helpful.
Right. It seems like you wouldn't really find fulfillment in those kind of avenues in a way.
Maybe, but again,
I guess
maybe there's
some
some
person, really.
Right, maybe there's some balance. Again, everyone's different, and there's probably a certain balance for people,
Right.
whatever that is. But I'm just saying, it's another thing that it can get classically conditioned and change over time. Depending on what you do. And so our decisions are all important. What we decide, how we decide to do things, reinforces certain behaviors and certain ways we are. And as we do more of something, we become whatever we do more of.
I can see it going that way. I think we got to stop it here for now.
Yeah, okay.
But we'll have to come back to the subject of dating because
Sure.
there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
As with other subjects. But we'll stop it here for now and come back with the next episode.
Okay.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.